I have an update on the stabbing and then the shooting that happened yesterday. I'll turn things over to Lieutenant Terrence Mattia.
Good morning, Lieutenant Terrence Mattia, Sioux Falls Police Department, Section Commander for Crimes Against Persons and Investigations. Just an update. Yesterday, Sam did put it out. It was a stabbing. We do know that there's 3 victims in this case. We're not going to release information on their names. I can give you their ages. The first victim was 6 years old. I will speak to some of what I can on the injuries and what we learned on the investigation as well. The second victim was 33 years old, and the fourth victim was 70 years old. Yesterday morning, about 7:35, officers were dispatched to Sanford Hospital. Arriving officers quickly learned that 2 of those victims, a 6-year-old and a 70-year-old, which is commonly referred to as coded, were in extreme life-threatening condition. The 6-year-old had his throat sliced open by a large knife. 70-year-old had extensive injuries as well from a knife, as well as the 33-year-old female, who's closely related to the child in this case. Officers immediately responded to the area on Garfield between 12th and 13th Street, which was immediately identified as a crime scene location. Attempted to make contact with the suspect in this case, Elwood Dwyer Jr., commonly referred to as the second, but Jr. in this case. Chief will obviously talk about that in a little bit here on what happened afterwards, but we attempted to make several contacts with Dwyer that was not successful for investigators at that time, and SWAT was called out to help us apprehend him and secure that location for a search warrant. I can tell you now the child, because we have great medical professionals in this community, all 3 of the victims were able to immediately drive themselves to the hospital, which is shocking that they even could with the extent of the injuries as a result of being stabbed so many times. I don't have an exact number on how many times they were stabbed or cut, but I can tell you the injuries were quite extensive. We're currently still waiting on updates, medical updates for the 70-year-old victim, and I can tell you right now it's not looking good. So, but hey, hopefully things get better and there's a change. But right now it's looking like it's dire straits. So, I'll take any questions you have because you guys are usually better at that than me, as we spoke about earlier.
Do you have a status update on the 6-year-old and 33-year-old?
Yes, 6-year-old is shockingly up, walking around, talking, amazingly so, and the 33-year-old victim is up and doing a lot better. Still in critical condition, though.
Critical condition, so what about the 6-year-old? Still life-threatening?
I'd say the 6-year-olds at this point, their injuries are not life-threatening.
The genders of the 6-year-old and 70-year-old?
Yes, 70-year-old is a male. The 6-year-old is a male. And quite frankly, I'll just say it. I mean, it's a mother trying to protect her son, and good for her for doing it.
And you can confirm that the weapon used is a knife?
Yes.
Are you able to speak at all to the relationship between the suspect and the victims?
Yeah, I will. It's a domestic relationship. The work that folks do in our community, like Children's Inn, Compass Center, Call to Freedom, everybody that deals with domestic violence every day, along with officers and Sioux Falls Fire Rescue, Sheriff's Department, everybody in this state. This is one of those cases where this is why we do it. So it's not total closure for everybody the way it ended, but a child's not dead today, and for me that's a positive thing. So.
Do you have any detail on what led up to the incident, to the stabbing?
Domestic situation, there was disagreements about, I'm not going to release that. There was a domestic situation. They were not together at that time. but from previous domestic history and what we know from on scene and what the scene is telling us, I would say it was a domestic assault, and with extreme severe injuries that may have or could still potentially result in death.
Did those stabbings happen at the house on Garfield?
That's correct.
Do you know, it might be too soon to tell, or might not be able to, drugs, alcohol, mental health, anything like that a factor in this?
I do not have any on that at myself. I know I can tell you during the search warrant of the residence, because obviously we went there after DCI was done with everything that they're doing for the other portion of the investigation. But we found no illicit drugs. We found nothing to lead us to believe there was alcohol involved or illicit drug or illegal drugs in this case.
Just to confirm, so there's two different investigations going on, one in the incident and one involving the officer?
Yep. So the Crimes Against Persons section and the Sioux Falls Police Department is investigating the assaults that occurred, the 3 stabbings. DCI, obviously, they handle the officer-involved shooting, which is totally separate from this.
And that's standard
What?
procedure?
That is, absolutely, and the chief's going to speak to that later. I'm just going to speak to the investigation now, but if you want to curtail to that, I definitely can turn it over to the chief. So, any other questions on the assaults at all? Okay. If anything changes, obviously we'll put something else out if any of the victims were happen to pass or if they get better, because I think the community, Sioux Falls and the state of South Dakota and all South Dakotans are pretty reasonable and can tell that the extent of those injuries, that we're pretty fortunate that we have a great medical community that it didn't turn out worse than it could. So, thank you.
All right, Chief John Toom, Sioux Falls Police Department. And as Lieutenant Mattia alluded to, there was an officer-involved shooting yesterday, which you've all reported on, and we gave some preliminary investigation on. As per standard procedure, to address that question, there's 2 officers, 1 Sioux Falls police officer and 1 Minnehaha County Sheriff's deputy that are involved and utilize their firearms. They've been placed on administrative leave, which is standard practice, and we just are following the policies we've established as far as that goes. As with these cases, immediately we know, and has been in the practice in the past, to turn over this investigation to the Department of Criminal Investigation to do the investigation of the officer-involved shooting, and we step back and cooperate with their efforts to make sure that they can paint the clearest picture of what happened and provide them the information that they need. Again, standard procedure, we're very confident with the actions taken by the officers. We're comfortable with DCI fully investigating this, and we want the most transparent, clear investigation so that way that paints a picture for what happened that day. It was not a good day for anyone involved. It's a tragic situation, as Lieutenant Mattia alluded to, for the crime, and we strive not to be involved in shootings. That's common sense, but sometimes that gets lost sometimes. This is, again, a tragic situation with a tragic conclusion, and really there are very to no winners in this situation, and because it's an impact on everybody involved, and we want, again, primarily the safety of those involved. Again, praise to our medical community. We take for granted sometimes just the outstanding resources we have here and the abilities that we have as a community in Sioux Falls to help people in need from multiple aspects. The medical community is included in that as well. I imagine you have some questions. Just keep in mind the shooting investigation has been turned over to DCI. I will not be giving specifics. There's certain things I simply can't talk about to maintain the integrity of that investigation, but I will entertain some questions if you have some.
Just generally speaking, like, what, like protocol-wise, what compels officers, I guess, to use lethal means as opposed to just, like, say something that would be less than lethal? Like
Oh, sure.
tasers? Like, what does that look like from the protocol?
It's the recognition of a threat, right? An immediate threat to someone's life. And it's important to note that multiple less lethal rounds were used yesterday. There's a misconception amongst the general public as to that these are 100% effective all the time. I wish they were 100% effective all the time, because that would be amazing, right? For obvious reasons. But we have sometimes unrealistic expectations of the capability of less lethal means, whether it's a 40 millimeter, which was utilized yesterday, or a taser. A lot of things just have limitations, and they simply don't apply to every situation, and even when utilized, are not 100% effective. If that answers your question. Yep.
Yep.
So you said a Sioux Falls PD unit and a Minnehaha County Sheriff's, are they SWAT members or are they street units?
By this point, the investigation, because of the severity of the crime and repeated attempts and asking him to come out, because that hadn't worked, the SWAT team was activated. And it is not uncommon for the Sioux Falls Police Department and the Minnehaha County Sheriff's Office to work together in these operations. We train together, we know each other very well, and just to that point, when you arrived on scene yesterday as a media, you noticed numerous Minnehaha County Sheriff's Office cars there because we work together so well. They recognized that this was a big call. We had a school to lock down. We had a hospital with some unknown situations going on there. We had a scene that obviously was rapidly evolving and very dynamic. And we don't even have to ask. They just come help because we understand each other's mission and work together very well. So when it got to the point where the SWAT team was activated, there was Sioux Falls Police SWAT and Minnehaha County Sheriff SWAT working in that problem.
How long did the standoff last?
I don't have the exact time frame on that. I know from what Sam said to where the call went off, I think we arrived on scene roughly a little after 8 a.m., but I'd have to clarify that for sure. And then I think you have documented when it ended.
And negotiators were used?
Negotiators were used.
Were they going to be in contact with the suspect?
Yep, it's standard procedure that even our patrol officers, in fact, one of the initial officers on scene is a gift, right? Certain guys and gals are really good at the communication piece because we practice it all the time. So we'll have officers negotiate, which started from the beginning, and then we'll hand that off to our crisis negotiation unit, who then picks it up and works through it. And in fact, I think in some of your footage that I looked at, you can see crisis negotiator units up front attempting to bring that to a peaceful resolution.
Can you speak to like the scene in terms of your dialogue with like the neighbors and the school nearby?
So sure, yeah. One of the immediate things is and this is again kind of in generalities, but this case comes through, we want to make sure the scene is secure. We want to make sure that things are locked down at the school. We want to fully assess the situation and understand what's happening. One of the things that was reported and that we haven't really touched on yet is there was a gas leak in this house as well, which further compounded the situation because, as we know, gas has a lot of other dangers that come along with it. So we need to communicate to neighbors either to shelter in place or stay in place, communicate with gas companies to see what we can do to mitigate that risk or that danger. Again, that was one piece that kind of compounded this situation a little bit too. There's been numerous cases around the country where that action has been taken and it's had further tragic results that resulted in an explosion or fire. So we wanted to make sure that was taken care of too. So we try to do our best to communicate the scene. Hard part for us is we also need to really block off the surrounding area and create that. And I know the press has been very good at, hey, we can't have you right here, but you can be over here. And I appreciate that cooperation from the press. We have a good dialogue and a good communication. But again, that all changes based on the threat assessment. Is this an edge weapon? Is this a gun? Is this a bomb? Is this anything? This kind of just changes how we have to really set up our perimeter.
So was the school on lockdown for a while?
I believe it was on lockdown. It's shelter in place, I guess we would call it. Because we could assess, okay, here's the involved parties, everyone's accounted for, here's what we have to work on, so let's shelter in place at this location. It's not uncommon for us to do that until we get the full, or at least enough details to understand that there's not a risk to the school.
Now, we talked to family yesterday afternoon, and they said they had issues just getting in contact with law enforcement. Was contact initiated, and did you guys know who the suspect was beforehand?
Yeah, so we were able to identify him quickly who he was. I can't speak to family contacted, perhaps Lieutenant Mattia can. Like I said, in a situation like that, there's a lot of information, but priority one is working that scene. So I can't tell you for sure when the family contacted. I don't know if anybody has any information on that. We could figure that. Yeah, go ahead, Lieutenant.
So I think you're speaking about probably a late article that was posted for you. So we did try and make contact with those folks. They were close family to the suspects, I believe, is how they identified themselves. We did make contact. We were actually on the phone with one of them at the time. It did take some time. We try and contact people as quickly as possible in that was family members. In this case, there was a very involved and highly active call, and so that did take some time. However, we did contact them, and it was at the same time that they were showing up on scene. So that contact did happen and did occur. So that is an accurate statement that was made.
Now, another thing I've noticed in talking to the family, they said there was some mental health issues, and I think there was some past charges for like aggravated assault against law enforcement.
Yeah.
Do you guys kind of keep those things in mind?
Yeah, we have no idea what his, I mean, at that time or incident, somebody could say, but we don't have his medical file. We don't know the detail. We do know that he was involved in the assault on law enforcement incident, but to be realistic, that like we work every scene as it is, and for these barricaded subject situations, it's not uncommon for us to talk to the family, do a recorded message, use that as pieces of intel to get that. This is a pretty fast evolving situation. Ultimately, in a barricaded subject type situation, we are really stuck to the actions of the individual, because we take great measure just to resolve this and really make an effort. We would just love to see them come out and participate in the judicial system and go through that process. And that's numerous overtures are made. You know, it's like, hey, could you just please come out? And that starts even before SWAT's activated. And that's what happened on this scene. There was dialogue and those requests being made. But there's a lot of information, but we simply are stuck responding to what is provided to us by that individual in that circumstance. But
I guess my last question would be, you kind of mentioned less than lethal rounds were used beforehand. Can you touch a little bit on that?
all I can say, because that gets into the complexity of DCI's investigation, is that we have a 40 millimeter less lethal impact launcher program. Right? I believe numerous of your agencies have done stories on this in the past, because it is probably one of the most cutting edge less lethal tools we have that's extremely accurate, effective. Again, not everything's 100% effective, like I stated earlier. And so recognizing that years ago, we've utilized that tool to save people's lives in these situations by neutralizing the situation with it. Sadly, in this situation, it just didn't have that same effect because of that. But yeah, we have that as a street capability for our patrol officers, and for our SWAT teams have enhanced less lethal capabilities.
Do you know if there's anybody else in the house with him?
No, because we go through a pretty strict vetting process. That's one of the first questions we're asking. And there was at one point somebody we had to account for that we thought may still be in the house, and because that changes the complexity of our whole situation. You know, because something where a crime of this nature could happen could quickly turn into a hostage situation, which is something we want to avoid at all costs. But once we were able to really clarify that that individual was safe in a way, then we kind of know what we're dealing with. And so he was the only individual at the house at the time.
I know you touched on it a little bit, but were you familiar with the suspect in terms of past things with him?
So we're familiar with a lot of people. A city our size with 130,000 call volume, like our record system is pretty extensive. And so we know people, we know activities, and for us to just, as we get involved into an investigation, we'll look at their history and see what we've had with them. I mean, that's a lot of information we can get from that. So again, we're familiar with a lot of people just based off our record system and our ability to look stuff up with the amount of volume we see and the amount of officers we have. What one officer is familiar with, another may not be. So again, yeah. So I'd say we are able to be familiar with him just by our records keeping system and what we can look up in those moments. But having monitored the call from the beginning yesterday as I was in my office, which is a bit of a new role for me, right? To watch things unfold and to see the investigative elements work, the patrol units lock down locations, within minutes develop a scene, within minutes contain that scene, within minutes make contact, to watch all the pieces fall into place. Our partners from Minnehaha County, our partners from DCI, the hospitals do their job, and to see that all unfold from that perspective, I was very proud of our community and proud of the resources and assets we have and our officers to really take that situation. And again, I will not mince words. It is a tragic ending, right? It is not one that we strive for, but at the end of the day, actions are made and we have to take the steps that come along with it. But again, the important thing is that there's a child that's alive, and hopefully our thoughts go with other individuals in the hospital that they can make that recovery.
Do you know if that area was to be blocked off today, or?
I'm sorry, say that one more time?
Do you know if that area was to be blocked off today, or?
Oh, I drove through it last night and it was open. So they were opening it up late last night after they did their search warrants and things like that. So, yeah. Any other questions? With just in mind, I can't get into specifics, but if you have anything you'd want to ask, I'd be happy to answer it for you. All right. Again, thanks again for the press side of things. Those perimeter scenes, again, being at a distance where we can ensure your safety but still allow you to tell the story that you need to tell. We have great cooperation with our press and want to thank you for that as well. So, thank you.
I don't have anything on the log. I'll go through stuff if you want, but I think you probably got enough what you're looking for.
Do you have any updates on those past incidents that we
No, the one, let's see, this was the stabbing on Harrington. The suspects, or the victim is doing better. The detective was able to get hold, and sounds like things are improving, so that's good news from there. But I don't think we have anything new on any of the other cases.
Okay.
Anything else? Okay, thanks.